Today, I'm going to talk about one of the characters in Hebrews 11, and I'm going to talk a little bit about me, too. So, I recently had a birthday, and, oh, thanks. Hey, what's up? Yes, so I've arrived in midlife. I Googled it. Yeah, and I got to say, it really is a bit of a crisis. Because I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm old enough to know I have no idea what I'm doing. So it's real. Yep, that's right. But it's really interesting because I feel like every year I do get a little bit more comfortable with the unknown, with like the not knowing. You get older, you get a little bit wiser. You're like, I think this is about how it's going to go the whole time. So that's where I'm at. But you know what? I'm getting a little more comfortable, and I feel like it reminds me, especially in my faith, that I need a God who does know. So thank God for this book, the Bible. And specifically for me, thank God that it's filled with a cast of misfits and rejects. Because if you know me, I can relate. I used to be afraid of the Bible. I grew up in some pews like this, but a very different church. And when I was little, I would look at the back of the pew and the Bible, and I feel like it was just yelling at me in capital gold letters. And there were always old men in robes with well-meaning messages, but I was a kid, and their voices sounded terrifying. But they read from the Bible in this like gorgeous gilded version, and I always wanted to touch it. I tried once. They didn't like that. But God's word, it never really hit me in the way that I think it was meant to. And so I used to avoid the book. But years later, when I met Jesus, and I actually started to learn his character, I started to realize that I was getting my understanding of God secondhand, like a bad game of telephone, instead of going straight to the source. So let me just use myself as a word of caution. Don't do that. Read God's words straight from his word. Because you have to see what he actually says and how he says it. So I don't avoid this book anymore, the Bible, because it's proven to be a comfort to me. Over the years, I've opened it in all sorts of emotion, in pain, in anger, in worry, in despair, in fear, and it has had something to say to me every single time. And when I get to really dig deep, when I get to study it for something like this, it starts to feel like that map in Harry Potter that shows everybody's footprints. It's like I get to see everyone's journey, everyone who came before me, and every wrong turn, every misguided step. It's all right here. And so I fell in love with the Bible, truly. And if you haven't read it, spoiler alert, they're a mess. Like a lot of them. The characters in the Bible do not have it figured out, and that has always resonated with me. Which is why, probably when I became a Christian, and I would meet these picture-perfect versions of Christians, none of you, but yeah. But I would meet this like version of a Christian, and I was new, and I just felt like they either wanted to pretend like there was no mess, or they made me feel like I was a little bit too much of one. And that was tough for me because I already knew the Lord, and I always wanted to say, like, have you read this book? Like, what page are you on? But that's rude and snarky, and I shouldn't, right? But that's a little bit a part of my story. So all I want to say is that this faith is messy, and I think we don't do anyone any favors when we pretend like it's not. So today I want to talk about a messy character in Hebrews 11, and we're wrapping up this series that we've been in for about 7 weeks called The Cloud of Witnesses. And Pastor Andrew asked us to look through Hebrews 11 and to read all of these heroes of the faith. Sometimes it's called the Faith Hall of Fame or the Hall of Fame of Faith. Read all these characters and choose one who would come down, join you in this race, maybe like run a lap with you. And what would they tell you, right? What would they have to say about their story, about their life? So, story time. I'm flipping through Hebrews 11 to try to choose my character. And if you haven't read the chapter, it's a bit of a pattern, and there's a pattern all over the Bible. And when there's a pattern, I'm a nerd, so I pay attention. So Hebrews 11 looks like this. I popped out some of the pattern. It says, it was by faith that Abel, and then a little bit of Abel's story of faith. It was by faith that Enoch, and a lot of what Enoch went through. It was by faith that Noah. It was by faith that Abraham. See the pattern, right? It's exact. Every single one, exact. Then I get to verse 11, and let's read this together, huh? It was by faith that even Sarah. That was so nice. I didn't read it like that. This is how I read it. It was by faith that even Sarah. I'm not proud of it. But that's how I read it. And this is my spiral, join me. So I go, okay, first of all, this is the first woman mentioned, and she gets even Sarah. That's a bit much, but it's what I thought. And then I'm like, first of all, rude, okay? Second of all, I got you, Sarah. Nobody needs to be talking to you like that in the Faith Hall of Fame. Like, you're clearly here, okay? So I stop right there. I don't read the rest of the verse. Don't read the Bible like this. Cautionary tale. I'll be it forever, but I'm happy. I'm happy to be it. So I don't read the rest of the verse, and I text Pastor Andrew. Sarah, period. She's my girl, period. Like I'm mad at him. Poor man. I mean, he's used to it by now, but still, pray for him. And if you know the rest of this verse, we're not going to read it now, but we'll read it later. If you know the rest of it, this is hilarious, okay? So this was in August, right before this series started. And fast forward to September, I took a little vacation, which I clearly needed. And I come back, and I feel a little lighter and a little more refreshed. And so I sit down with my Bible, and I opened it to Genesis, because I'm going to read Sarah's story. And I'm still muttering, even Sarah. Because I think I'm about to find all this faithfulness. Like it's going to pop off the page at me. Like Sarah is the VIP of faith. So there I am, I'm reading chapter after chapter, and I've got my little highlighter, like a little kid. And my highlighter is not touching the page, okay? Nothing is getting highlighted. I'm about 5 chapters deep, and it's about to dry out, people, okay? So I'm thinking Rahab is looking pretty good right now. But I committed to Sarah, right? So I finish her story, and I kind of like slump back in my chair, and I feel a little confused and a little defeated, and I said this out loud. I made a slide for it. Wow, Sarah, you're kind of a mess. And as soon as I said this, my very next thought, thank God, is from the Lord. And he said this, since when do I wait for people to get their act together before I do something incredible through them? Thank God for the massive gap between what I think and what the Lord thinks. And I know this. I have lived this. And I have read this. So all these stories of faith start flowing back. And I have not read the whole Bible, okay? Numbers has proven to be quite a challenge for my brain. But the ones that I do know, they start flooding in, right? I know he used a man with a stutter to part a sea. I know he used a boy with a slingshot and an attitude problem to kill a trash-talking giant. I know that he used a widow with 2 coins to teach generosity, a doubter to declare faith, and a barren old lady to birth nations. God is in the business of using messy people to do extraordinary things. So what would Sarah say if she stepped down from that cloud and she ran a lap with us today. I think she'd lean over, probably out of breath because she's like 90. But she'd share 3 powerful truths from a wise old woman, like lessons learned from faith, that I hope change the way that we highlight our own stories. So I'm going to share them today, and there's just 3, and they're not too long. That was the longest part. Andrew's always like, my intro's the longest. I'm like, cool, I'm going to do that. Great. So we're going to start at the beginning in Genesis 12. And the verses are going to be up here. You can read along with the Bible in the back of the pew. Don't be scared. It's fine. So Genesis 12, verses 1 through 5. The Lord had said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife, Sarai. So Sarah wasn't raised in the faith. Anyone? Yeah, great. Love it. Makes me super comfy. Thank you for being here. She wasn't raised knowing the one true God, right? And so she packs up anyway. Look at verse 5. He took his wife, Sarai. That's her first act of faith. And it's messy from day one, because she's following a God she has never heard of to a place she has never been because her husband thinks he heard voices. That's her perspective, right? She doesn't know God. He took his wife, Sarai. Fast forward to Genesis 15. This is a little bit later in her story. And God makes this incredible promise. Genesis 15, verses 1 through 4. Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great. But Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You've given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir. Then the Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. So God makes this promise, and Sarah is about 65, pushing 70 when this happens. And then nothing. For 10 years, nothing. So Sarah does what a lot of us do when God's timing doesn't match our timeline. She tries to help him out. Genesis 16, verses 1 through 3. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This goes about as well as you'd expect. We'll keep reading. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat Sarai with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, this is all your fault. I put my servant in your arms, but now she's pregnant and she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. I didn't highlight that part. Abram replies, look, she's your servant, so go deal with her as you see fit. Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. This whole thing explodes into family drama, right? Hagar gets an attitude, Sarah gets jealous, and Abraham throws his hands up like, figure it out, ladies. Then Sarah decides to treat Hagar so miserably that a pregnant woman would rather risk it in the desert than stay in the same tent. You'd think this would be game over for Sarah, right? She messed with God's promise. She didn't wait on the Lord. She probably hurt people in the process. And if you read the story of Hagar and Ishmael, it is complicated, it is complex, and it affects whole people groups to this day. But God does what God does. Genesis 17:15-16. Then God said to Abraham, regarding Sarai your wife, her name will no longer be Sarai. From now on, her name will be Sarah. And I will bless her and give you a son from her. Yes, I will bless her richly, and she will become the mother of many nations. Kings of nations will be among her descendants. So God changes her name. And in Hebrew culture, names aren't just what people call you like they are now. They're kind of like your whole identity and your destiny rolled up into one word. So Sarai means my princess, like she belongs to somebody else. God changes her name. It's one letter to princess, not somebody else's princess, but a princess in her own right, like capital P. This is wild what God does. And if we just look at her current situation, she still doesn't have her own baby. And she's got a 13-year-old teenage reminder of that living in her tent. That she messed with God's plan. It's literally living with her. And Hagar, not a huge fan, probably also there. And God looks at this whole situation and he goes, yeah, I'm still going to go with mother of many nations. That's God saying, your worst decision doesn't get to define you. He does, right? That's him going, nope, still the plan. Like, you're good, I'll cover it. I'll cover your mess with my grace. I'll cover your mess with my mercy. Still, mother of many nations. Here's the first truth I think Sarah would tell us. Your mess isn't bigger than his mercy. And this is where the faith comes in, and why I probably couldn't highlight, because this isn't in the story, but it's there if you read it enough, and God revealed it. Sarah has to decide if she is going to believe the new definition of God says who she is. She has to have faith to believe that she's not the old version of her, that she's this new version. She's not the old, barren, old lady. She's mother of many nations, but not yet. So we're going to zoom out, and we're going to look at the bigger picture of Sarah's story, because she's 65 when God first makes this promise for a baby, right? She is 90 when Isaac shows up. I feel like it's so easy to gloss over that, but that's 25 years. And I just want to kind of paint the picture of what that may have looked like for her, right? That's 25 years of people popping in her tent like, any news yet? 25 years of, for sure, avoiding at least every other baby shower. Right? 25 years of listening to that aunt say, maybe you should see a specialist. 25 years of wondering if she even heard God right. And then, finally, in Genesis 18, God shows up. And he shows up with 3 mysterious visitors. In some translations, this is angels. So we'll go with angels. I was going to say visitors. And this is what they say. Genesis 18, verse 9. Where is Sarah, your wife? The visitors asked. She's inside the tent, Abraham replied. Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Tell me that's not a woman. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So when the idea is biologically impossible, God shows up. Because he keeps his promises. And here's what happens next. Fast forward, Genesis 21. The Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named their son Isaac at just the time God had said it would. Not as soon as God spoke it. Not when Sarah wanted it. Not when her biological clock was still ticking. When God said it would. So here's the second truth Sarah would tell us. The waiting wasn't wasted. And here's why. Because if Isaac had been born when Sarah was 65, he would have been a blessing. When he's born to a 90-year-old woman, he becomes a miracle of the Lord. So the delay was deliberate. Ouch. It wasn't God being slow. It was God being strategic. Think about this. The same Sarah who packed up everything at 65 to follow an invisible God is not the same Sarah who became a mother at 90. No way. Are you the same person you were 25 years ago? And if you weren't born, let's go with 5 years ago. Of course not, right? That 25-year journey shaped Sarah into someone who could handle being the mother of many nations. Because God was working on preparing her. It wasn't punishing her, the waiting. It was preparing her. And he was working on both the promise and the person who would receive it. Sarah at 65 wanted a baby. Sarah at 90 got a legacy. Now listen, I don't want to sugarcoat the 25-year wait, because that's some serious business. If you've ever waited on the Lord for that long, it hurts. So I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I do want to say that Sarah wasn't sitting around like in a tent getting spiritually refined by God, right? She was being sharpened. And that feels the way that it sounds. But I still think Sarah would say the waiting wasn't wasted. Because God wasn't just preparing the miracle, he was preparing her for the miracle. So it's pretty likely we're all waiting on something from God right now. That's kind of part of the deal. So the question isn't, what are you waiting for? It's who are you becoming while you wait for it? Now, if that's all Sarah had to teach us, it would be enough. Like, those are both hard to swallow. But there's one more part of her story that I don't want to skip, and it's kind of what she's known for. So we're going to go back to that conversation with the angels where she was like listening from the tent, and we're going to finish that part. So that's back in Genesis 18, and we're going to pick up with verse 12. So she laughed silently to herself and said, "How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old? I love this so much because it's so honest. This is so human." Sarah laughs in God's face. And I know that sounds terrible, but think about it. She's 89, and she's looking at her 89-year-old body and her 99-year-old husband like, are you people serious? Abraham needs help getting out of his chair, and you want us to start a nursery? I think her laugh was one of the most honest things in the entire Old Testament. And this is important because I think she gets like a bad rap for the laugh. Like, Sarah, come on, have some more faith. Sarah, that's how dare you laugh in the face of the Lord, right? In the face of those angels. But look what she says after she laughs. The woman explains herself. How could a worn-out woman like me? That's not her saying, I don't believe you. That's her saying, I don't see how. And there's a difference. One shuts God out, and the other invites him in. And then he comes in. He asks her a question next. Genesis 18, verse 13. Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. So God asks this question, is anything too hard for the Lord? That's him redirecting her focus from her doubt to his character. And this is God's move through Scripture. He is constantly finding his people stuck in their limitations, in their situations, in their doubts. And he asks a question that invites them in and flips the focus back to him. This is God's move. And then Sarah says, it says, Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. I love this story. So when Sarah tries to hide her laugh with a lie, this is important. God only corrects the lie, which tells me, and this is my interpretation, that her honest doubt was always welcome, because it was the dishonesty he addressed. It wasn't the laugh, it was the lie. Look at Genesis 21, verse 6. That laugh becomes the very thing we think it should disqualify Sarah, right? That's what we think. We read it, we're like, oh my gosh, your laugh, you're the worst, you don't have faith. But it actually becomes the thing God uses, the laugh, to showcase his power. Chapter 21, verse 6. And Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. They named their kid Isaac, which literally translates to he laughs. Every time someone called his name, they remembered this story of God's faithfulness, of God's promise, of God's power. Her skeptical laughter in Genesis 18, inside that tent where she was hiding, became joyful laughter in Genesis 21. Same woman, same exact response to God's promise, completely different meaning. So I think this is the next truth Sarah would say, and the last. Your doubt doesn't disqualify you. And here's a challenging thought I want you to consider, because this has been the question God's just like punched at me, like he's literally just hitting me in the face my whole walk with God. And it's, what if you think the very thing that disqualifies you is exactly what God wants to use to show his power? So I'm going to land and bring it all back to the verse where this all started, right? Hebrews 11:11, and we're going to finish it this time. Tell Pastor Andrew I read the whole Bible all the time, all at once. Hebrews 11:11. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. I owe this writer an apology. Remember how offended I was by even Sarah? Well, if I wasn't a punk and I had read the whole thing, I'd have realized much sooner that even Sarah isn't about her character. It's about her circumstance. This verse isn't throwing shade at Sarah. It's showing off God's power. But honestly, this is the punk in me. It still lands the first way I heard it. Because look who made it in the Faith Hall of Fame. Even Sarah, who tried to outsource her promise to a servant. Even Sarah, who laughed in the face of angels. Even Sarah, who lied about laughing in the face at angels. That Sarah is in the Faith Hall of Fame. And here's what I love. I hated the writer, now I love the writer. Look what the writer says in that very last verse, Hebrews 11:11. The whole thing. He says, she believed that God would keep his promise. Even with the doubt, there was belief underneath. And now that we've read this whole story, we know she's not in this chapter because she never doubted, but because she kept showing up anyway. Not because she never made mistakes, but because she let God clean up her messes. Not because she always understood the plan, but because she eventually stopped trying to rewrite it. Sarah's considered one of the heroes of the faith, but none of them are the heroes of their own story. God is. The same God who kept his promise in Hebrews 11 kept his ultimate promise by sending us Jesus. The same mercy that covered Sarah's messes is the mercy that covers ours. That's his character. That's who he has always been. I think a lot of us can relate to Sarah's story because we're all walking around with messes that we think kick us out of God's plan, right? We're all carrying and wrestling with doubt that we think make us bad Christians, and we're all waiting on promises that make us feel like it's taking forever. So here's what I want you to try this week. When you catch yourself trying to manage God's plan, just say this out loud. That's not my job. And when you're exhausted from the waiting, remember you're becoming somebody while you wait. That's actually your job. And when those honest doubts pop up, because they will, don't dismiss them. Laugh them out loud. Bring them straight to God. He is big enough to handle any doubts, any questions you've got. I really wish someone had told me when I was first figuring this faith out that you don't have to have it all together before you start following Jesus. You don't have to wait for fully formed faith to just use the messy faith you've already got. God's not waiting for you to turn into someone else before he uses exactly who you are right now. You want proof that God doesn't wait for you to get your act together before he does something incredible through you? Just look at Sarah, the 90-year-old new mom who laughed at angels and still made it in the Faith Hall of Fame. And if God can use even Sarah, he can use even you.